and welcome to today's session of Digital Success Dialogue. Today's topic, how you can get started with AI-driven performance marketing for your business. And we have with us today Aji Issac Mathew, CEO of Indus Net TechShu and Digital Marketing University. And he will be joined in conversation with Chris Wexler, CEO of Krunam. Chris believes in technology for good and is fighting the distribution of child sexual abuse materials online. A super session today. Over to you, Aji. But before that, let's have a small video.
Thank you so much, Ishani, and welcome to all of you. And let's hope that today's session will add a lot of new dimensions in thinking about scale, not only at marketing, but also with respect to the operation, because that is something that we'll be talking to Chris. And Chris, welcome to the session. And
it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, Chris. Thank you so much for taking time. And I'm sure this new initiative that you're doing is a very important part of making the web accessible to all. And as you said, technology for good is the need of the hour, because when we have done technology, it got people connected, but also had its own cons to it. And it had the negatives which are as amplified as the positives are. So I'm sure that a lot of people don't understand the implication of the things that you're doing. So I will request you to just explain what you do and how it makes a big impact in the society, and then we'll take the conversation from there.
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you for having me on. It's always good to have great conversations with smart marketers and people that care about the world, and so I really appreciate it. At Crewnom, we started because we realized technology could really be used to help children around the world. There, in the last year, there were over 65 million instances of child sexual abuse material that was discovered on open websites like Facebook or Google or fill in the blank, and over 20 million different reports. So what has become really clear to law enforcement and to charity groups is that the tools that all of us use every day to get through work and life, predators are using to abuse and profit from the abuse of children. And every time one of these images gets shared, it's re-abusing this, amplifying the worst moment of this child's life. And so it was it's such a horrible thing that we felt we needed to do something. And it was really AI and machine learning that could do something that could deal with the scale, because 65 million images is a lot, but you're talking about sifting through trillions of images and videos. And so, one thing machines do very well is do repetitive work, do psychologically harmful work. It's hard to look at this stuff, to do things fast and at scale, so it doesn't interrupt typical workflows. And so our technology team did an amazing job of building a classifier that allows companies like a Microsoft, like a Facebook, to scan images or videos before they get uploaded, because the typical flow in a user-generated situation is it gets uploaded, it gets put up, somebody sees what the offending content is, says, hey, this isn't good, so maybe 10, 100, 1,000 people see it. Right. Then it goes to a human moderator that then has to look at it again to go, yep, that's violating our terms of service, and then they take it down. Well, that's a lot of human contact, and those poor content moderators, that's a really hard job. Like it's the typical length of time that you can stay in that job is about 6 to 9 months, just because it's so emotionally draining and damaging. And so our algorithm, our classifier takes humans out of the equation and allows the machines to do what they do well. And so it's an exciting leap forward, because the technology currently that's available only can identify what is unknown. But because we're using computer vision and AI, we can literally discern patterns of behavior, patterns of who's in the video or image, relative ages, to really understand what's going on and pull that out before anybody has to see it, which is really good.
Absolutely. And I believe that the days to come, the communities within a brand will also become a very important part of your marketing. And communities will only thrive if the communities are open and you have user generated content being allowed. So is your tool only for large companies, or even smaller brands who want to use it, they will have a plugin which can be connected and they can also use it?
Yeah, any company that holds the public's data can use our classifier. And so what's great about that is it takes the pressure off of having to hire people to manage that. And whenever you have an online community, I think we've focused so much in the last 10 years of building scale, getting a lot of people in there, making it really easy to share, make it seamless. Like, all that is really good, like digital best practices. However, like the next, and I think harder step, is how do we make those communities healthy? And how do we make those communities not harmful to the people in the community? So not just child sexual abuse materials or CSAM, but even threats or incitement to violence or fake news. Like, all these things are damaging. We've seen a lot of that in during the pandemic, where people are spreading rumors or lies that are actually hurting people. All those things, AI and machine learning and deep learning have a real great potential to help combat and make communities more less harmful, because there's huge positives for digital communities, but we're starting to see the real impact of the negatives.
Oh yeah, absolutely. When you said about positive, in my early days, we used to run some of the largest communities in US in the financial sector, and the help from one person to the other was so beneficial in the community. And whenever we used to get depressed, we will go and read the testimonials that other people have written. So many people who decided that my finance was in really bad terms and I wanted to end my life, and they used to come to our community. They used to get help from other community members, that how they have done this whole fighting and how they have won over their debts and everything. And that whole community bonding was so wonderful. And we had at that time, over a kind of a 500,000 kind of people who were helping each other with the finance related communication and debt consolidation and those kind of help. So the power of community, and we always used to say that you can beat a product, you can beat a pricing, you can beat a service, but you can't beat a community. So any brand which has the community will win over other people who do not have the community. So I think a product like yours will help them to build the communities without the worry of what happens when somebody spams to that large level, which is going to hurt.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, the power. I mean, right now we're in different sides of the globe, and we're talking to your audience. I mean, the power of connection online is so important. But the same power can scale things that we as a society don't want scaled, and so. But that's really hard to manage, and so I think I've always. In my career, I always run at hard problems, maybe to my detriment, but I like solving hard problems. And so that's one of the reasons we're truly excited about what's happening at Krunam.
Absolutely. So, just one of the areas that I am always interested in is, when I started the company, it took me almost 8 to 9 months to get a company name which everybody agreed on. Okay. So whenever we'll come up with for first 9 months, we did not even had a company name. We were running without a company name. So how did you come to the name Krunam, and what does that mean? Does it have a meaning? How do you come to a company name? Was it selecting a name a hard decision? Was it easy to come by?
Yeah, naming is always so difficult,
Yeah,
particularly when you have to factor in that you need to get a URL, right? URLs
absolutely.
are getting gobbled up left and right. What was interesting is we kept going back to the core of who we were, and which was, trying to save kids and scale that. And we went back, we kept going, well, it's kind of like this, it's kind of like that. You kind of look at analogies, and we played with shield or defender, or kind of these things, but not all of them felt a little wrong and weird. We had to do it quickly too. We were about to launch, and we realized the name that we had was going to not work globally, and so we had to fix that. And so we went to our inspiration, which is there's this woman in northern Thailand named Krunam, 2 words, Krunam. And she was a street artist in Chiang Mai. And she was very successful. She was doing very, very well. She did a project with the street kids, teaching them to paint, and she just goes, just paint your life. And then she couldn't believe the horrors that they were painting. And she realized that a lot of the businesses along her stretch of the road were actually fronts for child brothels. And so, unlike, I think, me and 99.9% of the other people in the world, she didn't go, oh, that's horrible, and kind of move on with her life. She just started walking in and taking the kids until she had 20 kids in her apartment. And then the traffickers literally came to her and said, we'll kill you if you do this again. So she got out of town. She went up to the northern part of Thailand and started a community. And since, she's constantly evolved her methods, got better at what she's doing. She's now saved thousands of non-state children in Thailand. In fact, one of the first kids she pulled out off the streets in Chiang Mai just graduated from college and university. One of the first non-state children in Thailand to do that. And so she's such an inspiration to us. We asked her if we could name the company in honor of her. Plus, as a digital marketer, I loved it because the URL was available and SEO was really clean, and it sonically sounds really well. So she had the perfect name for us, and so we're excited and honored to be named after an amazing woman.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it solves a purpose, and it honors somebody who has done the work, and hopefully technology will scale her dream to a next level altogether. So the story continues, and technology continues the whole story. And over there, the technology that you're using right now with various technology stack, and I'm sure that this problem existed for many years, but it was very difficult to solve if we did not had machine learning, AI. It's so difficult to have a human layer in between to do this, because the scale is massive. So how do you approach this within machine learning or artificial intelligence? Where do you start? Are there some kind of technology stack that you have in place that you want to talk about?
Well, I think and this is just kind of a universal lesson around AI and machine learning. You're only as good as your data.
Right.
Data is always the issue. Even going back to like old direct marketing days, your list matters, then your offer, then your creative.
Right.
But the data really mattered, and so that was something that our CTO and co-founder Scott Page and Ben Gantz, they were working with the UK Home Office, and they had put together about 3 or 4 years before a unified database of confiscated materials. The problem with CSAM is no private company, no one's allowed to hold this data. It's illegal data to hold. And so, but because Ben was a previous investigator of child crimes, they did a pro bono project where they literally went in and went, I wonder if machine learning can help. and help understand and identify this. So we literally had to drag our equipment into the offices of the police, and then, and this was back in 2015, I believe, 16 maybe, and then see if computer vision and machine learning was actually sophisticated enough to do this. You know, facial recognition is something that people know about in this, and it's problematic. It makes mistakes all the time, and it's seen millions of faces to learn. Right. What we're asking deep learning and machine learning to do is to look at intention of behavior based on body positioning, based on who is in the image. We were asking it to do a little more sophisticated work. And so the question was, could that even happen? And so taking the very cutting edge of computer vision and machine learning, we put it on an amazing data set that was curated by law enforcement, and found that, yes, indeed, we can get there, and then have refined it over the years. And so I think the most critical element of that, though, is the data set that's not only collected, but is finally labeled and properly labeled by people that are highly trained. I think a lot of AI and machine learning has a data cleanliness problem. And anyone who's tried to do a big data problem, you're like, well, the calculations won't take long, but it's going to take us months to get the data clean enough to do something with. And so, you know, it took me back to my marketing communications tech days, where we would work really hard. The earliest decision is the one that impacts you months and months and months, if not years down the road, of how do you label your data? How do you label your performance data so that you can parse it later? You can pull it apart and find the trends. Too often we don't worry about that until it's too late, and then your data is a mess. And so having this, with the UK Home Office, having the foresight to really pull this data together in the right way has allowed us to really push the boundaries of computer vision to help kids, which is great.
Right. So, as entrepreneurs, we are generally very impatient, right? So we want to see the things, and especially if you are making a product, you want to see it going live. And especially with the data labeling, it must have taken you a lot of time. So how did you monitor your progress, whether you're in the right track? Did you ever have a kind of a self-doubt? Are we on the right track? Should we speed this up? Are we all doing okay? So how do you motivate yourself that we are on the right track?
Well, it's interesting. One of the reasons Krunam is here is really to scale the solution. And so it was originally designed for law enforcement, to help law enforcement, because there are very few investigators that are looking at sexual crimes against children. And a lot of the time that they spend is literally going through confiscated materials to see if the perpetrator that they found has violated the law. And so we saw almost immediately in that sphere that it sped investigations and actually saved kids. And so that's a pretty strong motivation, that literally we saw kids pulled out of it freed up investigators to free kids. And so that's on an emotional level, that's great. What we found is it's really difficult as a market to sell into law enforcement. There's not a lot of money there. There's not a lot of investigators doing this work. And so that's why we pivoted to start bringing this out to the online communities of the world, because when we're dealing with communities at scale in India, in the US, in Asia, in Southeast Asia, that's really, we can start moving up the data stream to where they find these images and just stop them at their source. And so that was, I think, the most impatient moment, was we're like, oh, we need to get this technology to more people. And we realized we had to kind of reformulate how we did the company to do that, which, that's an entrepreneur's job, is to kind of figure out what's the next step.
Right. And so since your background is also into marketing and performance marketing, and on the operations side, you're dealing with AI, machine learning. So, in marketing also, now we see that marketing is primarily driven by AI in many sense. Like, we don't have to manage the campaigns the way we used to manage the campaigns previously. So what do you see for a performance marketing with respect to AI? Do you see major changes happening in that? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think the most exciting part of AI and performance marketing is bridging the gap and elongating our understanding of the impact of marketing. I think um, I'm lucky enough or old enough, one of the two, I guess that's
Right.
lucky, to have been doing this since almost the very beginning of performance marketing. I remember explaining to my clients what a cookie was, and now I'm old enough to have watched the death of cookies. Um, and so, uh, but at the very beginning, we were so excited. Oh, we can see when somebody clicked where they went on your website. Oh, this is so cool. Um, but what we found as we did it more and as we did this, that there were marketing outcomes that were happening that didn't match the very nearest term data. And so sometimes a click isn't all that indicative. Sometimes it's more important to measure if somebody's seen something. Sometimes it's more important to see if they've engaged for a certain amount of time. And so, over the years, we as digital marketers got more and more savvy on what really mattered as far as a success metric. Well, I think the next stage, particularly with AI, is I think we'll be able to calculate more of a lifetime value of performance marketing. And I think that that's the exciting part of it is I think there's been a real conflict between performance marketers and brand marketers. And I was lucky enough to work for a lot of the premier brands in the world, leading digital marketing for Harley Davidson or their agencies, Harley Davidson or Microsoft. And so like large global rollouts, right? And every year I'm like, I wish I knew what I knew last year. And so that's kind of how it always is.
Right.
But when you work on those big brands, you're worried about where your ads are running because you don't want it to be in a spot that will damage the brand. And so I've been worried about brand safety for years and years and years. But the other thing, we had, either large television or out of home, billboards or fill in the blank. And I think as we were able to get more data on the holistic business, we were seeing how those things work together really well. Granger was a great example that it's the, I think, 8th or 9th largest e-commerce platform. And it's all, businesses, B2B, selling to people running factories and that kind of thing. And when we ran radio that targeted those people, our conversion rates online went up. I've seen that with retailers. Like when you run a television ad, all of a sudden you look brilliant in your paid search. All
Right.
these things interconnect, and it's on such a mass level, but a micro level of like that television ad might increase your digital performance marketing by that much. And the only way you're going to ever quantify that is at mass scale of data to go, okay, if you run these two together and we have 4 years of data, we see that there's going to be this much of a lift in your performance marketing. And that's the exciting future, I think, is we'll understand how they work together. And as a result, make them work a lot more efficiently.
Right. And with digital marketing, because of the KPIs and because of the data which is available, so sometimes we go overboard with tracking and looking at the data. So when I work with the project, I tell them that I am doing A and I'm doing B and I'm also praying for you. As long as any of this thing is working, you should be happy about it. Don't think about whether A is working or B is working or prayer is working. As long as your top business is winning, so that's the point number one. And point number two is getting details into the data. Sometimes this data tracking can it's very difficult to integrate all of this data together at times, which can make sense. And not everything makes sense can be trackable, and sometimes what is trackable does not make sense either. So in that way, it's a difficult challenge in the era of data and tracking and everything. and you're overwhelmed with the data. I mean, KPIs altogether.
Yeah, exactly right. I do think, yeah, you mentioning that there's just too much measured. I think that's exactly right. I think, as getting your data clean is one thing, but also really understanding your goals is
Yeah.
really important. And I think too often we look at everything and go, well, all those are good, but what about that? When that doesn't matter. And so agreeing on that early is really important. Like, this is success. This is what it looks like.
Absolutely.
And I think too often that doesn't happen in digital marketing, because we think about we can look at this and that, and like, it doesn't really matter. Like, that is not something that's driving your business. I think that also the over focus on near-term metrics sometimes hurts brands too. I've seen that where, the performance marketing team is killing it, but as a result, they're alienating X amount of people. And when I say they, I mean, that was an experience I had. Like, I did a great project for Harley Davidson, but it was annoying the other half of people that didn't like it. And that hurt us in the long term. So we actually had to lower our performance marketing goals because we saw the negative impacts elsewhere. And I think that's the other thing AI is going to help us with.
Right. And that's an area where I think there are a lot of honest conversations are required between all the teams, where both the teams does not have to justify whether their work is great, not great, but like looking at a impact not only from a short term but also from long term perspective.
Exactly.
And because the integration of everything makes a lot more sense rather than working in silos, for sure.
Exactly. It's just not easy to do. It's difficult, but it's worth the investment of time. I've seen it over and over. It's worth the investment of time to do that.
Absolutely. And see, one of the challenges that we are all facing is, the ever changing technology, where you need new brains to come in and look at how the technology work. And on the other side, you have people who have more maturity at a business level who does not understand the technology. Okay. And now, who will drive it? Who will take care of it? And how can a mature person work with a person who understands the technology, so that both the things can work together, is a challenge in itself. And just taking one point from there is, when you hire people, because hiring in itself is a complicated scenario, especially when you're working in a new technology and new innovation altogether. So what do you look at when you hire people? Is there something specific that you're looking at?
Interestingly, there's a couple things that probably aren't what you might expect. I look for two traits. One is, are they self-driven? Are they self-motivated? Because I'd much rather say, hey, stop working so hard, than begging them to work. You can't really train that. That is what it is. But the other one is, I look for kind of a spirit of curiosity and learning. I want them, when they see something weird, to go, why is that? And let's figure out why that is. Like, when the data doesn't match what they expect, or when a result comes back and it doesn't make sense, they don't just go, oh, well, that didn't work. They go, why didn't it work? And I look for examples of that in their past. Everything else can be trained. Like and I obviously love it when somebody comes in with a technical skill that I don't have, or the team doesn't have. That's always great. Or a background that we don't have. So, like, bringing in, like, particularly in ad agencies, typically, at least in the US, I don't know how it is there, but we tend to hire our own. Like, oh, you've been in an agency? That's great. I actually liked bringing in people that hadn't been in the agency world, because they brought a different perspective that really helped us understand what our blind spots were. And so having kind of a diversity of backgrounds and thought was really critical as well. So curiosity and this unique background was always good for me, because then we could get people working together. Then our job was to train them on how we like to do things, but then have them impact how we do things and make it better. And that's how it over the long term, it made us a much stronger organization.
Right. Just taking one pointer from there, since right now, because of COVID, the whole education system is disrupted in many ways. Okay. And right now in India also, we are having this conversation whether the 12th standard exam should be done or should not be done because of the COVID. Yeah, and on the other side, you have a industry where people are not looking at the education as we used to look at in the past, and you're looking at people who are problem solver, who are curious. Is there anything that the education industry should do where this curiosity, problem solving, these things are a little more encouraged? Do you have any pointers? Because end of the day, that is something that is the need of the era.
Yeah, as someone who likes to solve problems, I've looked at the educational system and
Right.
thought, boy, it's one of the few industries that are doing things almost the exact same way as they did it 120 years ago. And it seems like a spot that's ripe for innovation, but it's actually really difficult. I would have appreciated more in my background in school, less rote memorization and facts, as in how to discern what a fact was, like more systemic thinking than more kind of memorization and rote education. Obviously, there's a need for some of that, but educating the next generation on how to identify what is and what isn't real, what is and what isn't factual, what is and what isn't legit. Like, so just basic statistics should be a much earlier spot in the educational stack, because you're able to look at something and go, that's you're play. I believe Mark Twain said there are lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Right.
And so understanding how to see through that is really critical. And so I do think the educational system needs to move to more systemic thinking. I think there's small steps going that way, and it would help because we're obviously having to teach a lot more in our educational system than even 20 years ago. Teaching systemically is one way to kind of scale learning as well, because you're thinking frameworks of thinking versus facts, and that's a really critical evolution that I think could be really helpful in educational circles.
Absolutely. So I'm aware of the time that we just have another 5 minutes available with us. In the last point is that as entrepreneurs, as business leaders, we all need to keep ourselves updated. And this last 1 year, I have seen the amount of knowledge which everyone has shared online, the podcasts, the things which are available. So that there's overwhelming data which is available for entrepreneurs and business leaders or anybody who wants to learn. So what are your favorites? Do you have some favorite books, podcasts where you keep updating yourself?
Yeah. But my favorite book in the space of marketing is by Byron Sharp. It's called How Brands Grow. You talked about the data and how sometimes it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
When I read How Brands Grow, and I read another paper he did called The Long and the Short of It, all of a sudden some of the data, weird data I saw made more sense to me, because it kind of it's an academic, but it's an easy read, but it's an academic look at how people actually think about brands. And so when you understand kind of what really drives performance, and it's a data-driven book, it all of a sudden opens your eyes to, I need to I don't need just to get their attention right now. I need to get into their memory. That's a very different task, right? And so that one was really amazing. Kind of, I was trying to make sense of the world, and when I read that, it all of a sudden made a lot more sense. So I'd highly recommend How Brands Grow by Byron Sharp, as well as the paper out there, the long and the short of it. In the podcast world, I'm a bit obsessed with behavioral economics books or podcasts. So, whether that be a Freakonomics or I'm trying to remember the name of it now. Anyway, there's another great one by on National Public Radio here, The Hidden Mind, or Hidden Brain. It's what it looks at is how the wiring in our brains sometimes isn't that logical. I think the brilliance of behavioral economics is that it looks at, all of economics and frankly all of performance marketing, which I was living in for years, is built on people are logical and they make logical choices. And the truth is our brains don't always make logical choices, and understanding better how that works is really key. And this all goes back to another book that I love, which is Danny Kahneman. Oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of it now. That's embarrassing. Anyway, but anything by Daniel Kahneman, kind of the grandfather of behavioral economics. It's a really critical way to understand human behavior and understand it on a level that is acknowledges that we're not perfect, that we have weird ticks in how we think. And not to use them to trick people, but to understand really what motivates people. And I think that's a critical space that if I would encourage anyone to kind of dive into behavioral economics.
Absolutely, and that certainly aligns with rather than looking at tactics, look at the foundation of it, and tactics will keep on changing, but end of the day the foundations will remain very, very strong. And as long as you go back to the foundation, you will always remain a good marketeer. Whether the cookie remains or cookie goes away, but still the marketeer inside us can survive and we can all continue to do good. So that's there. So there is a question by Zion. Find the right communication remains the biggest challenge for every marketeer. Do you think AI bots will replace copywriting? How excited are you about AI in content field? Any solution you recommend us to watch out for from an AI perspective? Because I've heard AI doing movie scripts, AI doing a lot of advertisements now. So what is your take on that is the question from Zion.
Yeah, I think it's kind of amazing what's happening in the natural language processing space. Right. I do think I always talk about marketing as kind of a dumbbell. It used to be all together, right? But now we're seeing performance marketing becoming much bigger and kind of going. But then I think brand marketing is still going to be critical long term. And so I think some of the AI driven copy, I think will be really important in kind of what I call algorithmic creative. We started playing with that at my last firm of, hey, let's do 1 million versions of this banner and have the AI optimize it based on background colors, background, what's the headline, so instead of, doing A/B testing, we're doing A through Z testing. I think that's coming. You need to have a lot of scale to do that well. But I do think that's coming, and I think that will be great. I still think we'll need amazing copywriters. I think sometimes that human touch will be that will never go away, or it will take years and years for that to go away, if that's the case.
Absolutely. If I add what you said initially, that on one side we take logical decisions, but on the other side we are still emotional human beings. And according to some statistics, we still take 70% of our decision emotionally. So as long as
exactly.
So as long as that emotional part is there, there is always somebody who can write emotional copies, which may not come from a data, but it might come from your gut feel, your hypothesis, and then that starts working. And then of course the AI can pick it up from there. So it's going to be a combination of who initiates the copy and then who scales the copy to different levels. So that's
a good point. That's a really good point. And AI is inherently backwards looking. It's only looking at the data that has been out there. So a new idea could be exactly what you need, and AI will never find that new idea. It might find new combinations, but it won't find something truly new.
Right. So on the technology level, I'm always scared to say that, whether it's going to happen or not happen, because the things can change anytime. And thank you so much, Zain, for asking the question. And I think that's where we are. We'll not take further questions because we are already running short of time. Thank you so much, Chris, for taking your time and sharing the thoughts with us. And I'm sure that the initiative that you have taken will make the internet a far safer place and better place so that more people can be accommodated. And I wish you all the best for your venture. And I'm sure sooner or later I'll see you on the billionaires list and waiting for an autograph where you have changed the world for good. and of course the return comes in some format or the other. All right.
Well, I really appreciate you having a really great, interesting chat, and I hope it was helpful for your audience. Just keep curious and keep trying to learn, and everybody will everybody will get better. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you.